So we've just been throwing the keys to the new Ducati Multistrada V4S. Now this V4 engine is new to me. I haven't actually ridden the Panigale V4 or the Street Fighter V4, but I have ridden an awful lot of Multistradas. I've owned 3 or 4 Multistrada 1200s in the past. So I'm fascinated to see what this is like and how it takes Ducati forward with a new Multistrada V4. Now this is the S version, which basically means Ducati have emptied the toy cupboard on this bike, and it's got so many electronics on it, the kind of level of electronics you'd get on a MotoGP bike or even something like a supercar. Now this bike's equipped with radar cruise control. It's also got blind spot assist, it's got traction control, wheelie control, up and down quick shift, electronic suspension, you name it, this thing is laden to the max with toys. But for me, it's going to be all about that engine and what that feels like in a bike that Ducati calls an adventure bike. But look at it, it definitely looks more like it's on the touring edge of adventure than it is on the off-road edge of adventure. But with 170 horsepower, it's certainly not going to be slow. The bike weighs in at around 218 kilos in this spec with all the packs on it. But it has the radar and touring pack, so you get the luggage, the radar cruise control, which I've already mentioned, and this bike also has an Akrapovic pipe on it too. So it really is ticking all the boxes. So let's go and ride it and find out just what it's like. So we have spent all day riding the new Ducati Multistrada V4S. And I have to say, this morning I was ever so slightly worried that Ducati had ruined the much loved Multistrada by sticking the V4 engine in it. And I couldn't be further from the truth. Now, I've been doing this job a long time, so I should have guessed that Ducati don't make a bad motorbike, let's be honest. I suppose the one criticism I'd have of this bike is that it's lost a little bit of the bottom end that you get from the V-twin engine, from the 1200 or the 1260. But that said, everything else on this bike is phenomenal. It's a V4, so of course you're going to lose a bit of bottom end compared to a V-twin. But the amount of grunt it's got once you get sort of above 4,000 RPM, and then this magic power band that sort of drives clean all the way from 5 all the way up to the 10,000 RPM red line, eventually hitting the 11,000 RPM rev limiter. And when you get it up there, the thing absolutely hauls, and it barks and it accelerates like no other adventure bike I've ever ridden so far, that's for sure. Now, we know there's a lot of competition coming from Harley Davidson and from KTM, but right now this is about as good as it gets for an adventure bike. If you saw this bike at 100 paces, you'd know distinctively that with that beak styling at the front, it's a Multistrada, but it's now got MotoGP style wings on the side. Now, Ducati claim they add more downforce and give more grip to the front end and help stability the bike, and I have to say it's incredibly stable. Whether or not you'd feel the difference if I just took those off right now and went for a ride, I'm not sure, but if Ducati say it, then it's probably true, and if it's good enough for a MotoGP bike, then it's good enough for an adventure bike. So it's full of toys, as we said, and some of them you're going to love and some of them not so much. So we've been trying out the radar cruise control. Do you need that on a motorcycle? Well, that's up to you, not up to me. Do I need it on a motorcycle? not really. But I can see that on a long motorway journey, you can just engage it, sit in traffic, set it to 70 mile an hour, whatever your fancy is. And it will make a long journey really relaxing. It's not something that I would choose to have, but it works very, very well. Now, the electronics on this bike are incredible. They're derived from MotoGP, and the traction control, the wheelie control, the skyhook suspension, it all means that this thing is cross-country is as fast as anything that's out there. Now, if going fast isn't your thing, it can also do comfort, because you can engage different engine maps. You can set the suspension to how you want. You can basically tune it to your own rider preference. So you can change the preload, you can change the amount of wheelie control, you can change the amount of traction control, you can adjust the ABS, you can basically just tailor it for your own preference. Now, as practicality goes, I'm 6'4" and I'm, I've had a good COVID, let's say that. But the wind protection's fantastic. You can lift the screen up and down really easily with one hand. The panniers are really good. I can get a full face adventure helmet in that left pannier there with a pair of gloves, so if you nip into a shop or something. The seat's really good. It's got a heated seat and it's got heated grips, and it's a bit cold today despite the sunshine, and I've had that on all day. And do you need a heated seat on a motorcycle? Again, questionable. Would I have it? Most definitely. In terms of its handling, for sure you've lost a little bit of that flickability that the old bike had with a 17-inch front wheel. It's got a 19-inch front wheel now and a 17-inch rear wheel, but unless you spent a lot of time on the old bike, you wouldn't really notice the lack of flickability that it's got, because it handles incredibly well for such a big bike. And saying that, although it's 218 kilos and the motor, the V4 Gran Turismo engine, looks big, it seems to carry its weight really low down. So I think even if you're not used to riding such big bikes as this, once you pull away, don't worry about the weight. It's very well balanced. The system that the Ducati's got, and this being the V4S, has got the bigger 6.5 full colour TFT dash. But it runs off a joystick control off your left thumb, and I have to say it's very, very easy to get used to, and you can adjust pretty much everything on the fly when you're riding, and the display is so clear that it's very, very easy to get used to the system just using your left thumb. I think when I left Ducati this morning, I started using the indicators rather than the joystick, but literally within about 2 miles I'd forgotten about that, and I was just scrolling happily through the menus. Now, this being the V4S, you can also link it up to your phone, so you can link sat-nav to it. You can link it up to a Ducati headset so you can take calls. We haven't played around that much with it today. We quickly connected it, but it seems, again, very, very easy to use. So overall, what about the Multistrada V4S? I think in car terms, it's something like an Audi RS6. No surprise, as Audi own Ducati. But the way this thing covers ground comfortably, fast, it's stylish, it's really quite hard to fault, unless you're that Ducati aficionado that just misses that slightly snatchy V-twin bottom end. But for me, I'm a big fan of this engine, I'm a massive fan of this bike, and Ducati has done a superb job of improving the Multistrada even further.